One of the strategies in this approach, besides communicating realness, is also using effective communication. And we just talked right now about if something's bothering you, you really need to be able to communicate it. One of the primary principles of communication during classroom management or discipline episodes is that the teacher talks to the situation, not to the student. This is great parenting too, by the way. You know, everything I've been talking about is all great parenting as well as good classroom management. You're going to talk to the situation, what the situation was and what the student did in the situation. Not that the student is bad, not that the student has a horrible personality, not that the student's character is flawed. That may all be true, but that's not what you speak to. You speak to what you saw. And there is something called an iMessage. I don't know if I mentioned it the other day, but the iMessage really targets how you feel about what a student did.
Now that's on the ATSW.
Yeah, and it's also in your textbook in Cooper in Chapter 8. I'm not going to mention it very much, except to say that it's there. That it is there, you make sure you read it. There are the steps in the iMessage when you use an iMessage and everything else.
So, I'm sorry, could you just repeat what you said before? Give me an example.
Of an iMessage,
Yes.
A student has misbehaved enough that none of your other strategies work. You take that student aside and you say, and the student is going to go kicking and screaming, I didn't do anything, how come you're always picking on me? All right, you just move that student aside. Everybody else you have working on their activities, and you say, I saw you, whatever you saw them doing. This is how it affects me. This disrupted me, my train of thought. I was not able to give clear directions. What are we going to do about it? Don't say, I want you to do this. You've got to put that burden back on the student. This is what I saw. This is how it affected me. This is how it affected the other kids in the class. So what are we going to do about it? Notice I did not say, what are you going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? I mean, you know, this whole collaborative approach, it's the little things. And this is a little, you know, it sounds like a little thing. And then let the student come up with whatever. The other part of an iMessage is you can allow the student to say, give his or her side of it. But the upshot is, what are we going to do about it? I mean, we can't have this go on again. Let the student come up with solutions. And basically you can say, I don't think that's going to work, or let's try it. Okay, so use effective communication. Use also something called active listening. You know, sometimes when you get really upset, your ears get closed up, and you're really not listening to what the other side is trying to say. You really must use active listening. And active listening means setting aside all of your emotions, all of your upsetness, all of your anger, and actually stepping back and just listening. Active listening also means that you paraphrase what the other person is saying. So when a student says to you, I did, or so-and-so did this, you can stop him or her and say, you mean da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Just to make sure that you are both on the same wavelength. So active listening means separating yourself from your emotions. It also means paraphrasing and then going back to what are we going to do so that this doesn't happen again. Alrighty, and now we are up to our last approach, which is called the group process classroom approach. And this approach says that the central task of the teacher is to establish and maintain effective, productive classroom groups. You'll notice sometimes when you go around, not to school media centers, but to other classrooms, where you will see that their tables and chairs in the classroom are always in like a square, like there are 4 tables and chairs. That's pretty much a good indication that that teacher uses a lot of group work. So then that teacher would probably be using this group process approach to classroom management, because the philosophy of that classroom is one of groups, that students are going to work in groups and will facilitate students working in groups. When you are developing effective classroom groups, you need to do the following. You need to clarify your expectations, which means that you have to make sure that your students really understand what their individual accountability is to work in a group, as well as what their group responsibility is. This is all cooperative learning. What else do we teach for those 620 people? What else do we teach in cooperative learning to help facilitate groups and group process?
Sink or swim attitude.
Yes, you want to facilitate the sink or swim attitude, which is the group. The group is not going to get through this unless every single person contributes something else. Something that we teach to in cooperative learning. Social skills. We teach really good group process and social skills. Okay? We teach students how to listen to each other. We teach students how to share with each other. We teach students how to make decisions in a group, how to problem solve in a group. And how do we take some of those amorphous concepts, 2 phrases that I told you throughout 620 and over the past couple of days, or 2 phrases we use when we are trying to teach a habit of mind, a disposition, an attitude.
What does it sound like? What does it look like?
Exactly. What does it sound like? What does it look like? So you take the components of these attitudes in order to teach them so that everybody understands what it means to listen, what it means to share. Because remember, your students coming in honestly don't know it. Don't know what it means, for the most part. All right, so we have clear expectations, problem-solving discussions, and one of my favorite strategies is called with-itness. With-itness. That's where mother has or father, excuse me, Anthony, mother or father has eyes in the back of their heads. With-itness. That is that the teacher communicates to the student that he or she knows exactly what's going on and that they're aware of what the students are doing or not doing. That's where you could be talking to a group and another group is working behind you, and all of a sudden you turn to them and you say, I know you guys are off task. You're talking about the party next Saturday. How did you know? I used to tell them, just like your mother, I have eyes in the back of my head. That is withedness. So you are constantly aware of what all of your students are doing or not doing, and you target misbehavior that hasn't occurred yet, but you know it's possibly going to happen. So you need to be very, very aware of the actions of all of your students in class, and you need to react immediately, and that's called forecasting problems. Now, at what point do you think you should ignore problems?
Maybe if you know a child is really just looking for attention,
How much can you ignore it?
and to the point of not really disrupting other people.
Okay. Okay, exactly. It's okay to ignore really, really simple problems, according to what Linda said, when a student really isn't disrupting anybody but him or herself. Having said that, I think that you should approach the student when you have everybody else taken care of. So you can ignore it for the minute, but don't ignore it totally. Because if you ignore it totally, then you may lose that child for the entire period, and you don't want to do that. All right, like I would ignore my favorite misbehavior until the point I wanted to go, ah, stop it! You don't want to ignore it to the point that all of a sudden you're going to blow up. You could ignore it if it's just like, and then the pen goes down and you're still talking and the child doesn't pick up the pen again. If the child picks up the pen again, then the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be a hierarchy of strategies to use. All right? I do want to point out to you that the chapter in your textbook takes a lot of what I have said of how I divided up all these approaches and the individual strategies. The author of that chapter has synthesized a lot of what I've said. So I expect you over the weekend to definitely read that chapter. All right, you're going to read basically the same things I've said in a different, somebody who presents it in a different way. All right? So now let's look at the hierarchy. What did I do? All right. The handout I'm going to give you, is literally just the hierarchy, and we're going to talk about very, very, in a small way, what each of these things is.